Hello, my name is Carl Miller. I am a graduate student at Wisconsin Lutheran College. This video is my learning environment plan for my Education 585 class. I sincerely hope you do enjoy my video. And for anybody who is watching that is an educator or a future educator, I hope you find my video informative and helpful in helping create your own school environment and learning environment. Alright, so before I begin, I'm just going to be talking about what I shall be discussing in this video. I shall first be discussing the description of learning environment, so aka I'm going to be showing you what my physical classroom will hopefully look like in the future. A second thing I shall be discussing is classroom management. And third thing I shall be discussing is grading, followed by a discipline plan. I shall be then ending the video with unique ideas and concepts that I have thought of that were not discussed about in the first parts of the video. Alright, so let's start with the physical learning environment. As you can see in my slide here, I created a bird's eye view of what my classroom should look like. I made this picture in Google Draw, and I'm very new to it, so if you do not understand, you can just send me a message or send me an email, and I will try to answer as best as you can. I'm very new to Google Draw. Alright, so if you notice, the first thing in my drawing is that I have all my desks in kind of a cube shape. It's supposed to be a cube. Again, still new with it, so bear with me. So I got the idea of putting all my desks in a cube from Harry and Rosemary Wong. The Wongs are the authors who wrote the book First Days of School and How to Be an Effective Teacher. In their book, they say that it is ultimately the teacher's decision to where to put their desks. As a history and Broadfield social studies teacher and an English teacher, I do believe that having my desks in a cube are important for two main reasons. One reason is that I'm going to be having a lot of discussion, and by having desks in a stereotypical lined up fashion in most classrooms you see will not do enough justice for in-depth discussion. When students can see each other, that they will be able to work better in discussions and things like that. A second reason why they're in desks is that by having everybody look at each other, everybody seems to be on an equal playing field and everyone's ideas are going to be equal. Alright. A second idea that I use from the Wongs is where my desk is located. If you can see, my desk is located very close to the desks in the cube, but there's still some distance in between just for walking purposes. The reason why my desk is close is because students will want me to be next to them, indirectly or subconsciously speaking, because when a teacher is far away and when a student has to get up and walk to ask a teacher a question when they're not looking, it can be really intimidating or challenging depending on the teacher's demeanor and things like that. So by having my desk close, my students will get a good, warm, fuzzy feeling and will be more open to the idea of talking to me if they have questions. As you can see, if you look on the outside of the classroom, there are a lot of posters. I have posters all over the place, and I got these poster ideas from Jack Snowman and Rick McCown, who wrote the Psychology Applied to Teaching, and I also got some ideas from Kenneth Kushner and Avril McLean and Philip Safford. They wrote the book Human Diversity in Education and Integrative Approach. Let me just first talk about Snowman and McCown's ideas. So my ideas that I learned from them are at the front of the classroom where I've written font, and on the left wall and the back wall. So in that book it says that students will feel motivated if there are ideas and concepts in the classroom, physical ideas and concepts written down that will make them feel better. They'll be motivated to do things. Alright, so at the front of the classroom I have motivational posters because when I'm doing videos or teaching a lesson, I'm going to be doing a lot of my talking or showing the videos and stuff on the smartboard. And when students look up at the smartboard, they're going to see those posters. Now, indirectly or directly, they're going to think about them, and it's going to hopefully inspire them to do better. On the left wall, I'm going to have newspaper clippings of students and their achievements. The reason why I'm going to do this is because it's going to show my students again that I do care about them, and if students feel loved and cared for by the teachers, they will produce results when it comes to learning. Alright, and on the back wall I'm going to have funny pictures just of silly things that are obviously classroom appropriate, just so students can get a good laugh and again feel that they can talk to me if they have a question or anything like that. And that's pretty much all the Snowman and McCown's ideas. On the right wall, I'm going to have cultural posters, like posters that inform students of cultural differences. African American posters of African American heroes, Chicano posters with Chicano heroes, things like that. The reason why I'm putting posters on the right wall is because in the Kushner and McLean book, the Kushner, McLean, and Safford book, the authors say that in American classrooms, a lot of minority students feel disenfranchised because the ideas and concepts they are learning are not about minority groups for the most part. They're about white Caucasians. And this is kind of true, I feel. As a history teacher, a lot of ideas and concepts come from ideas from European society and American society, which are usually dominated by white Caucasian males. And by having posters of minority groups and minority leaders and things like that, my minority students will hopefully feel that they are not disenfranchised in the class and will want to learn ideas and concepts that may seem like it is more geared towards Caucasian white students. All right, so moving on. Now we're going to talk about management procedures, and I'm just dividing everything up so you can see what I'm going to be talking about. The first thing I'm going to be talking about is attendance, followed by distribution and collection of materials, assignments, and homework, and what I will do when class begins, and handling students who are returning from an absence. All right, so let us get started with attendance. So I took a lot of my ideas, again, from the Wong book, as well as James Cooper, who is the author of Classroom Teaching Skills. Both Wongs and Cooper say that the best way to take attendance is informally and privately when students are working on something at the beginning of school or at the end of the hour or during independent work time, just some time when there's free time for you as a teacher. I'll be doing this in my class. There are two main reasons why. The first reason is that a lot of time is wasted if you formally do attendance and call the students' names and be and everyone says here, here, here. It takes a lot of time, and that does add up over the course of a school year, and that is kind of robbing students of their time and robbing the teacher's time as well. So it's just easier to do it informally. The second thing is that in middle school and high school, students come in late. Usually some students will come in really late, and by doing attendance right at the beginning of the hour and then having students come in late, you're going to have to do it again. That just wastes the teacher's time. So it's just much easier to do it informally in the middle or towards the end of the class period. Moving on to distribution and collection of materials. Again, here is my rinky-dink bird's eye view picture of my classroom. Now, if you all look next to the smartboard on the left side, I have a little box that says bins for handouts, homework, and classwork and homework from previous days. That's a mouthful, so I'll just slow it down for you. In my future classroom, I shall have 4 baskets/bins. 1 basket shall be for class handouts. 1 basket shall be for homework, and 1 basket shall be for previous days' work or handouts and worksheets or whatever is missing, and 1 basket shall be for late homework or for students who missed a day in class to turn in their homework. The reason why I'm doing this is because I feel that having baskets at the front of the classroom are going to be a lot easier, and I feel that if I can teach students to come in and just look at the baskets and grab whatever they need to and turn in right away, that they'll get into the groove of doing it, and then I won't actually have to waste a lot of time with passing out homework or worksheets or whatever. Students will just pick it up and then class can begin immediately. All right, so when class begins, a lot of times teachers decide that class is going to begin when the bell rings. I'm not so much a fan of that idea because when the bell rings, before the bell rings, students get really chatty and are talking and blah, blah, blah. And what happens is that when the bell does ring, that it takes a while to get them settled down. It's just much easier if students do come in and just sit down and start working right away. So in my school, in my classroom, what I plan on doing is having the students come in right away and then just sit down and start working on something. I will be having my students work on a quick read or some kind of bell ringer activity that will get them started. The reason why I'm doing this activities at the beginning of the class like that is to get students prepared for whatever it is they're working on, and also as an informal assessment to see how fast or slow I can teach my lesson for the day. All right, so now we're going to talk about students returning from an absence. So when a student returns from an absence, I feel that that a person that is missing a certain amount of days has that amount of days to make up their absence and do the work. So example, if a student is gone for 2 days because they're sick, they have 2 days to make up the work. Now, this is not like written in stone. Depending on what we're learning, it might be more complicated than that. It might take more than that, depending on what is going on, if there's a testing or tests in the class. All right, so if a student is gone for more than a week because of a sickness, I shall have to have a personal meeting, a private meeting before or after school, on talking to the student how they can catch up and what we can be doing, some sort of differentiation plan to get them caught up. So the only other thing I can think of when students were absent when I was making this is if a student goes on a long vacation. So if a student goes on a vacation for a couple of days, like more than 2 or 3 days, I would expect that they would come to me and tell me about that, and I could have some sort of meeting with them so I can kind of give them some sort of work that will help them be prepared for when they come back. By doing all these ideas and concepts, hopefully I'll be able to address students that are absent. Alright, so now we're going to be talking about grading. Again, I have a slide just going to kind of have a general overview I'm going to be talking about before I jump into depth about everything. So we're going to be talking about formative assessments, and then I'm going to talk about late work procedures and redoing assignments and extra credit in regards to formative assessments. And I'll be talking about a summative assessment. All my ideas and concepts come from the man named Wesley Null. Null is the author of The Curriculum from Theory to Practice. Alright, I got most of my ideas from that book, so I don't really talk about any other authors at this time, but if I do, I will let you know. So let's talk about a formative assessment. A formative assessment is, an assessment that is done at the end of a unit or at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, something that is really just over one idea or concept. Alright, so I've kind of decided that in my class I'm going to have informal formative assessments and then informal formative assessments. My informal assessments are going to be bell ringer activities, exit slips, and quick writes. Those aren't really going to be graded. They're just going to be used to see how my students are doing and what I can do to change the lesson, or if my students are understanding, what I can do to jump ahead that makes things a little bit more challenging. Okay, so for my formal assessments, I'm going to be using projects and mini projects. Null says that in schools that traditional ways of assessing students formatively really bores students to death with your tests and your quizzes. He said it's just much easier to think of different projects for them to do because their products that they make are going to be much more worthwhile. And I totally agree with that idea. So what I plan on doing is having my students work on projects and mini projects for a formal assessment that and give them options to doing that. When you give students options, they'll make a better product for you. And by doing that, I will actually learn what students are learning, and I'll also be working with their intelligences and all that kind of stuff. Alright, so moving on to late work. In my classroom, I will accept late work, but however, there's going to be a caveat with that every day that a student turns in something late, 1 point is going to be taken off. So depending on what that is, that could really hurt a student or not, depending on how much something is worth. So if a student turns it in 1 day late, they're going to lose 1 point automatically, and 2, and so on and so forth. If the student does not turn in the assignment after 7 days, so literally a week, I'm just going to make it a 0. The reason for that being is that after 7 days, if a student does not turn it in without a reasonable excuse, if they're gone or on vacation, well, I'm not going to obviously do that. But if a student is in class for 7 straight days, and I remind them every single day to turn in an assignment, and they don't do it, they obviously are not going to do it, so they shouldn't get any points for that. All right? So then let's talk about redoing an assignment. I am a firm believer in redoing an assignment because students sometimes do not understand what is being taught in class all the time, and sometimes students just have a bad day and don't do the work right just because they just don't understand. So I do believe in redoing assignments. So if a student gets a bad grade on an assignment, I will let the student redo to get points back. Students will have a chance to get 100% on an assignment. However, this is again a caveat. This is for students that have turned in everything and have no late missing work. If a student turns in an assignment late and does really bad on the assignment, they will have the chance to remake the points, but whatever they did for the late work, those points are going to be deducted. So if someone gets like an 8 out of 10 on something and they turned it in late, they're still going to have 1 point taken off for being late. So moving on to extra credit. What Null says in the book is that extra credit should be given to students that are doing everything right. So I agree with the idea that extra credit should be allowed in my classroom. I will allow my students a chance to do extra credit. I shall be open to any ideas and suggestions as long as students have no missing work, and students can relate the extra credit work to being what is done in class. So if I'm like teaching a class about the Civil War, I wouldn't expect my students to talk to me about extra credit about something about like cavemen or something about the American Revolution. It has to be something that's relevant to what's being going on in class. The reason why I say this is because giving students extra credit and having them relate the idea to what they're learning gives them a chance to learn something that's outside of what's being taught in class about what's supposed to be going on in class. One thing I didn't mention also in this slide is that I do plan on having my students meet with me before they do extra credit, just so that they were on the same footing and something like, classroom appropriate is being made, not something that's not appropriate or off the walls, not related at all. All right. Moving on to a summative assessment. So a summative assessment is an assessment that is usually done at the end of a semester or at the end of the year. So in my classroom, what I plan on doing for a summative is I'm going to have an end of semester exam, so one at the end of the first semester and one towards the end of the semester. So the exam itself, I don't have too much of details for it, but the exam shall have multiple choice questions and true or false questions and a writing portion as well. So the reason why I have this is because the literature that I've read from NOL says that that there are many statewide standards and national standards that students must have, and by having true or false and multiple choice and writing portions, it will meet all those standards. Also, by having a summative assessment like this, my students will be indirectly prepared for an assignment that is related to testing or the testing for the state itself, because many times students don't know what they're doing, but by having a summative like this, they will be better prepared for national and statewide testing. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about my discipline plan. So a lot of my ideas, again, come from Wong. I love using Wong, so if you're wondering why I'm using it a lot, it's just a great source. So I'm going to talk about a minor situation and a major situation in discipline. So let's start with the minor. A minor problem to me, after reading through a lot of the literature, is something that is really minuscule, that's not going to really ruin the flow of the class. Okay, so it'd be like a chatty student or a student on his phone or something like that. So I'm just going to put everything in steps. The first thing that you should do, or I'm going to do, is first just ignore the problem. And if the student continues the minor problem, just quietly confront the student. In the literature, it says that, don't make a big stink or make it loud, anything like that. The student is looking for attention. So the best thing to do is just ignore the student and approach him quietly if he makes a scene or anything like that, and just remind the student to stop their behavior, all right, to work on what they're working on. I would say that you should repeat yourself a minimum of 2 more times, because it's not, again, going to destroy the flow of the lesson. If the student does not stop his or herself, what you should do is move to step 3 and isolate the student, and move them to a part of the classroom where they can't be disrupting or their behavior won't be dealing with the other students. All right, so, and then the fourth thing you need to do is have students meet with me. They're going to meet with me after class to discuss the behavior and what we can do to stop that. And in the meeting, I'm going to kind of let it all on line, like, you're not doing anything that bad, but you need to correct your behavior, or you're going to have more negative consequences happen to you that are worse than just me isolating you. All right, so let's then talk about a major problem. So a major problem is something that will disrupt the flow of the classroom, that could really seriously screw up everything. So if there is a major problem, what I plan on doing is I'm going to quietly walk up to the student and tell them they are not complying with the classroom and school rules, and only repeat this one time if it's really, really this bad. And then 2, just instantly isolate the student. If the student still causes a problem after isolation, what you should do is send the student out of the classroom. I know that a lot of people say that sending the students out of the classroom is not the right answer because they might want to go out of the classroom. I strongly disagree. Sometimes students need to be sent out of the classroom, because if they are not sent out of the classroom, they're just going to destroy the lessons, and it's just going to be a terrible time for everybody involved, and it's just not worth it. And most modern schools these days they don't just sit in the office. Students go to in-school suspension and are actually forced to do things, so it's not like it's just getting out of class. The fourth thing I plan on doing if I send a student out of the classroom is call or email the parents after school or during time, not during class. That's inappropriate and it's just a waste of time. And talk about the behavior of what that student was doing, and then try to create a meeting between the parents and stuff like that. Many times the parents want their students to do well, and they're not opposed to the idea of meeting with a teacher to discuss some way to help the student behave better in school, which is great. All right. So after moving on to behavior, we're going to talk about unique ideas that I plan on incorporating into my own classroom. All right, so the ideas I'm going to be talking about really broadly and then jumping into depth would be having healthy snacks for lunch money for students, technology incorporation, differentiation, and learning of a community. All right, so let's first talk about food. My ideas come from Snowman and McCown again. In my classroom, I shall have bottled water and healthy snacks for my students. I shall also provide students money for lunch if they do not have food for themselves. The reason why I say this is because in this modern world, there are many students that live in low-income families, and sometimes students don't have money for food or don't have any food at home. And when this happens, students have a very hard time dealing with this hunger and not being able to conceptualize information. It's kind of a thing with the needs theory. So if students cannot have their basic needs met, they will not conceptualize and not be able to learn. By having healthy food and like bottled water and money for students to have lunch, they will feel full and they will hopefully conceptualize the ideas and information. Also, by having food in my classroom and water and being able to give money to my students for lunch, they will understand that I do care about their well-being. All right, moving on to technology. So all my ideas in this slide came from Judy Morganson and Charlene Fleener. These two wrote the book Reading in a Contact Area. And in this book, both teachers say that with the way of the world, students are very easily distracted without technology. The reality is that students are born with technology these days, and without technology, students would not understand a lot of great ideas and things like that because they wouldn't care. They just wouldn't study or do anything. So you have to incorporate technology into classroom lessons. So I'm not going to go into real deep detail because this video is already me just prattling on and on and on. But I'm going to use like websites and other technologies like Kahoot and Quizlet for reviews of things, or show student videos at the beginning or end of class to kind of get ideas or concepts for students to understand. Like an example would be if I'm teaching political science, I'm going to show CNN Student News at the beginning or end of class so students kind of know what's going on in the world politically or something like that, just so they can understand the main ideas and concepts. It also keeps students engaged and they care about the lesson and what's going on. All right. Third thing is differentiation, which is from Wong. So in the Wong book that I was told, and I agree with the idea that you need to teach to an individual student, not to the class as a whole. Students are each different individual learners, and they learn at a different individual way. So you need to have different ways to differentiate the lesson to be able to help students understand ideas and concepts better. A second reason to have different lesson plans is to have backup lesson plans in case something goes wrong. I can't tell you how many times I've been watching teachers teach a class and something happens and they have no idea what to do. And so they just kind of sit there. By having different things planned out, that you're ready for any sort of plan any sort of problem that could arise. All right. So the final thing that I plan on doing is learning of the community that I plan on teaching in. So in American society, there is a big developing new identity of mixing of cultures and things like that. For a long time, there was segregation in certain school districts down south and in the north as well. Not as bad up here in the north as it is down south in the past. But as time goes on, more and more students from different diverse areas are coming into the United States and into American classrooms, which is great. That's a great thing. Having diversity is fantastic. But the thing is that there's a huge divide between students and teachers these days. A lot of teachers are white and middle-aged women or men, and they come from middle-class communities. And that problem is that there is a big divide between students and their teachers. They don't really know how to relate to each other because they don't understand each other's culture that well. So in order for me to combat that problem for myself, that like during the summertime when I first start working somewhere, I'm going to try to get to know the community better, just by kind of like walking around the area and maybe talking to people that live in the area about certain ideas and concepts. And by doing that, you can learn the ethnicity and the ethnic ideas of a group of people that live in the area and what you can do or not do to help things go smoother in your classroom. So by doing that, everything shall work smoothly. These ideas I'm talking about for this slide here came from our textbook. Evan Spapani, I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry. He wrote the book Author of Society, the Classroom, and Instructional Practice, Perspectives of Issues Affecting the Secondary Classroom in the 21st Century. And like I said, he basically says in his book that there's a lot of diversity going on, and a lot of white teachers are teaching diverse classrooms, don't know how to react to the diversity in the classroom. And by having students, having me go through the community and learn about the ideas and concepts of different groups, I'll be able to combat that problem. Alright, so that's pretty much the end of my video. My last slide is just my works cited page, and all of the ideas and concepts I did talk about are discussed in these sources. So if you want to learn more, just look those sources up and you'll see the ideas and concepts that I'm using. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed my video. I do understand that it is quite long, but I hope you did enjoy yourself, and have a good day. Thank you. Goodbye.